Our future hangs in the balance. The teaching industry, the education industry is in free fall.
So many children aren't even being educated properly.
I feel like there are efforts right now to dismantle public education in a variety of ways.
A gun in the school is not just the solution, it's a properly trained person with a gun in a school.
How can we know what to change if we don't know what went wrong?
Poverty wages have got to go.
This is not a zero-sum game where private schools win and public schools lose.
All of Texas students will be doing better with a robust school choice program in the state of Texas. Eject!
I'm very concerned that teachers are not being adequately compensated.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Kelly Wiley.
And I'm Nabil Ramadna. The state of education in Texas is at an inflection point.
From school safety following mass shootings to how our state delivers on a fair and appropriate education for all. We wanted to get the people working on the ground in Texas schools.
And the people responsible for creating the rules and laws they have to follow in one room together to take on some of the most important topics facing our schools.
We've invited teachers, leaders from private schools, Texas districts, large and small, urban and rural, and the legislators who have the power to make changes. Let's jump in and introduce you to our panel.
From Del Valle ISD, Cristela Rocha is a language arts teacher with 26 years of experience.
Hi. Cheyenne Miller is the principal of a small rural school in Rockdale ISD.
Since 2017, Dr. Douglas Killian has been leading the Pflugerville Independent School District as superintendent.
I stand for parents.
Mandy Drogan is a mother of three and school choice advocate with Texas Public Policy Foundation.
And from the Capitol, joining us is Democrat Representative Gina Hinojosa, Republican and former Superintendent Representative Gary Van Dever, and Republican Representative Brian Harrison.
The Great Resignation was perhaps felt hardest by schools across the country, and Texas was no different. Since the pandemic, an unprecedented number of Texas educators left the profession, according to Texas Education Agency data.
Nearly 93,000 classroom teachers across the state, some retiring early, many quitting to pursue different career fields. This is expected to come up in another anticipated special session focused on education in October.
The state is woefully underfunding our public schools.
Promises to increase school funding fell short this legislative session, and now some Texas public schools face budget concerns.
Costs have continued to rise. We were hoping for some relief. Unfortunately, that hasn't come as of yet.
Our public education system has been starved for resources for far too long.
Just weeks to go until the start of the school year, districts across Texas are reporting teacher shortages.
Teachers feel undervalued, underappreciated, underpaid, and overworked.
Teachers and support staff have soldiered and sacrificed through a pandemic, and we are still here. We have weathered years of financial storms, and we are still here. Despite the alarming rise of teacher vacancies, many of us are still here.
Okay, so let's get started with the superintendent in the room. Have we recovered as far as teacher shortages this school year?
Not at all. I don't see that it's improved much over the last couple of years. Actually, we're seeing it beyond just teachers. We're seeing shortages in bus drivers, custodians, educational aides. And so that's taxing our teachers too in the classroom. So I don't think we're done yet.
Cristela, you're a longtime teacher. What has the last couple of school years looked like? What does this school year look like as far as who's still in the building?
We have 97% capacity right now. However, on our campus, we have 23 new teachers. So it's like opening a new school.
It looks to be different maybe for different areas. What do you think is the issue in Pflugerville ISD right now?
I think a big issue is pay. That's going back to the inflationary pressures that we're seeing in the economy. Everybody's feeling the same thing that folks at home are feeling with the price of everything going up. And so I've got a lot of staff members that are looking at outside employment. And when you have a job market that's as hot as it is with as many openings, people make selections.
Priscilla, I just do want to jump back to you. You were saying it's like starting all over again when you have all these new teachers in the building. Talk to us about what that means for the teachers who've been there for a long time.
Of all the teachers that have been there for a long time, there's only 4 of us left. So we're the ones that are kind of put in charge of things because we've been there the longest. So it puts a lot of more on our plate than we normally have, but we're more than welcome to, but it still kind of puts us in a spot where you can only be in one place at one time. And so it's teachers coming from all over the state. You know, we have people coming from out of state that want to come and work in Texas. But again, the pay is an issue. The travel is an issue. The cost of living in Austin is an issue. And the respect that the profession is being given is an issue.
Before we move on to the lawmakers, I want to go to our principal. You're in a rural school district. What is it looking like for you?
So as far as teachers go, we are fully staffed right now. However, we're having to get creative in making sure our teachers feel supported. We do have some people that are still uncertified. We've got different programs that we look at across the district to try to support teachers. However, our teachers that have been around for a while, like she was saying, we're relying on them to mentor and to support teachers when we can't always be available. And so that's putting a lot of pressure on those teachers, and it's tough. So we're trying to compensate, like you said, for the lower pay, and with that we're putting a lot more stress on the teachers we already have.
I want to get to some of the lawmakers here real quick. Is the formula for funding public schools across the state working, and could something be changed?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt that things need to change. I think most of us recognize that our public schools are underfunded, especially given the inflationary factors that our schools are facing, the higher cost of everything that they have to purchase. And so, I think generally, the legislature agrees that we need to do more in funding. It's just a matter of how do we do that? What does it look like? And how do we distribute it is really the sticking point, I think.
Representative Harrison,
Sure.
Weigh in on this?
It's a great question. I mean, there's probably no more important issue that the legislature grapples with than how we're going to educate the next generation of Texans. And before I began my almost 3-hour drive down south this morning, I started my day like I do every morning at my local public school, seeing public school teachers that are educating my children. So I could not agree more that in addition to empowering parents and educating students, it is imperative that we support the public school teachers in the state of Texas. And I'm ashamed to say that the two issues go together. You talked about funding and support for teachers. We've got to be willing to ask the tough questions if we're going to find the real solutions. And that's who is not prioritizing the appropriate compensation of teachers in the state of Texas. And I hate to say it, but right now that's the current public school monopoly. We've had a 116 increase in per pupil funding that's gone to the schools over 20 years, or the 30 years past 1970. Only 15 of that has gone to teachers. I was really proud to have authored the biggest teacher pay increase proposal in the history of the Texas legislature. I wish I could say that all my colleagues on the panel had supported that. It unfortunately barely failed. But we've got to do a better job making sure that my constituents and your constituents pay their hard-earned money to the state for the purposes of educating kids. Those dollars end up in the classrooms and to the people that matter most, and that's our great public school teachers in the state of Texas.
Let's hear from a parent now who can weigh in on the issue.
My name is Camille Ross. I'm the parent of a kindergartner here at Regents. A big concern that we always have is ensuring that teachers are set up for success in the best way that they can, from pay to supplies to parent support and administrative support. So what are your plans to make sure that we have our best year yet and that our teachers stay in their jobs both this year and next?
Representative Hinojosa, would you like to start with an answer to that question?
So the state of Texas funds our schools in the bottom 10 states nationally. Some put us in the bottom 3 states. And just to keep up with inflation since 2019, we'd have to increase funding about $1,000 per student. Our teachers are paid $7,000 below the national average, and I can go on and on with these figures. We are not fully funding our schools. We're one of the few states that penalizes our schools when kids are absent. And so we deduct funding from our schools when kids are absent because we fund based on attendance rather than the number of students enrolled. This during COVID has been a bigger hit to our schools. So there are lots of reasons why we're not funding our schools appropriately. The House has tried for the better part of a year to put more money into our schools, only to have the governor and the Senate tie a voucher or an education savings account to more money for our schools, essentially holding hostage our kids and our schools for a voucher for political reasons. So at this point, the ball is in the governor's court. He can put money into our schools. He has funded his priorities in the past, in the interim, like the border wall, like he did with virtual education when the bill that he supported did not pass. He was able to waive parts of statute to put money into virtual education. It is time for him to do his job and fund our schools. We don't need to come back for a special session to do that.
But, oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of segue on what she was saying, because I did talk to a lot of my colleagues before coming, and a lot of them agreed that they want a pay raise, but they're not interested in negotiating the future of public education for a small pay raise. And it feels that that's what we're caught in the middle of. Educators are caught in the middle of this game where it depends on what's attached to what. So if we want to give teachers a pay raise, then do a bill that's a loan and not attached to anything that is specifically just a pay raise. Otherwise, you're holding us hostage in the same spot with funding.
Do you want to say something?
I'd love to jump in on that. I think that this is a great conversation for us to really get the culture of silence around the funding out on the table. When we're talking about state funding per TEA's expenditures, we've actually funded students at over $15,000 per year. Now, we're not talking about the basic allotment. That's just a fraction of it. And when we talk about the fact that no money has been given to public ed this year, that's just not factual. When HB 100, the budget bill, was passed and signed into law, there was $6.3 billion in there that we gave to the public system for wonderful things. And let me be clear, I'm a mom of 3 and my child goes to a public school. I'm cheering for it. I think it's fantastic. We also have another $4.5 billion that was there that was actually in HB 100 that died. To the question or the statement that something is being held hostage, let me tell you, as a mom, and that's all I am, I travel around the states hearing from parents all the time that would say the exact same thing. They feel like they're being hostage to a system, not to teachers. They want to pay teachers more. I want to pay teachers more. Everyone that supports empowering parents recognizes it empowers teachers. The problem that we're not talking about is the fact that when adjusted for inflation between 1970 and 2020, based on the National Center of Education Statistics from the Department of Education, we have increased per student funding in Texas by 166%. We have increased teacher pay by 16%. I am so sorry. I stand with you. I stand with teachers, and I stand with parents who say, this is absurd that we have a system that holds hostage parents, children, and teachers so that we can fund things that do not impact students. We know the 2 indicators for students are their teachers in their classroom and their parents' involvement. That is the most crucial part of a child's education. So when we're actually talking about the numbers and how we're funded, let's look at the total picture. Let's look at the money that we're putting into the classroom. That $6.3 billion that was absolutely given to public schools is nowhere in the basic allotment. It is important that we give parents choices to pick the school that best serves their child. And it is important that we hear the calls of leaders like yourself and make sure that the administrators and those people that are writing budgets for public schools are doing so to honor the wishes of teachers and parents.
And we are going to get more into school choice here in the next couple of segments, but we do want to ask lawmakers here moving forward. We'll get to you just shortly, but as far as school funding here, teacher pay, that's something that comes up a lot. What are y'all looking at if this special session comes up to make sure our teachers really stay in these districts?
Well, I think something very similar to House Bill 100 that was filed in the regular session. I look for something similar to that to be filed and work its way through the process. And I know a lot of people are working on different pieces of legislation. Again, I think we also need to recognize when we talk about the increases in funding over the past decade. I don't think we can ignore the fact that Texas school have grown. We have so many more students in Texas public schools today than we had 10 years ago. And so when a lot of the increase in funding is really just funding growth. And it's really difficult sometimes to just fund the growth that we see in our Texas school systems. And also, again, the inflation that our schools are experiencing, the unfunded mandates that we put on them as lawmakers, all of those things have an impact on the school's ability to budget adequately for student growth.
Would anyone like to add on or respond to this?
Just real quick, the idea that we're simply funding growth, unfortunately, isn't borne out by any data anywhere whatsoever. We are not only funding growth, we are funding an increase in per pupil spend. Let me be very clear. The state of Texas has never spent more on a per pupil basis than we are spending at the very moment we are having this discussion. And unfortunately, we can't only focus on the revenue, how much money we're giving to the schools, because I hate to say this, but educational outcomes were higher when per pupil funding was lower. So on behalf of the taxpayers on the state of Texas, we got to make sure that we are not just putting good money after bad. And unfortunately, we've got to be able to accept reality. And the reality is that only 24% of Texas 8th graders can read and do math on grade level. That's got to change. We're clearly doing something wrong. And then a couple comments here on the idea that we didn't increase public school funding because of school choice. That is just flatly not true. It's not even close to true. We had an increase of almost $1,900 in per pupil spending on the bills that passed this session. Way more than just the $1,000 on top of the BA that people are asking for. And on the teacher pay, I was the one, and so I know this, that proposed an amendment to HB 100, okay? It was clean, not a word about school choice or ESAs. It simply would have required schools to do the common sense thing, and that's prioritize their teachers by making sure that schools were giving at least half of their operations budget and putting it in the hands of the people that matter most to the outcomes of our kids. That's our great public school teachers. We got almost 90 votes, but unfortunately Representative Hinojosa and almost all the Democrats in the chamber fell on their proverbial swords to make sure that we did not pay teachers more money and force the districts to prioritize teachers the way that they deserve to be prioritized.
Representative Hinojosa?
The amendment that my friend Representative Harrison proposed was gimmicky.
Nope.
He proposed it on the floor, didn't give anybody any notice. It was
Not
tied to a formula. Nobody knew if their district would even get money under that amendment. So no, we didn't support this seat of his pants amendment, but Democrats multiple times proposed teacher pay raises, multiple times proposed increases in per student funding. So I want to be clear, I have a voting record that is very clear in support of our public schools and increases in per student funding. Look, I don't know how much we've increased since 1970, right? But everybody who looks at this sees Texas can't compete with other states currently in our per student funding. There may have been an increase in education this last legislative session. So much of it went to the Texas Education Agency. In fact, we're about to move into school safety. So much of that money went into creating a bigger bureaucracy at the state. And the reason why we focus on per student funding is because that's money that goes to the classroom, that goes into teaching kids. That's why that money is so special. And that's what we need an increase of about $1,000 per student just to buy what we bought in 2019.